baseball is kind of where a lot of the stuff really started. The data's always been there. With the NFL, there is a lot of data, but baseball's been at the front end of sports data for a very long time.
You put in so much time to think about a simple, every keystroke you put in to code something, and it just spits out everything you need.
It really gives us the ability to give like a whole distribution of potential outcomes.
He had such a great year last year. It seems like if you're pulling just from the stats, he would be the number one guy, right? So why is he not the number one guy? What is it that the algorithm's doing to make it a little different?
So my background is mainly data science and analytics, primarily in like the small business lending space. So I started doing like machine learning and focusing on data like in 2014. I kind of saw like the wave was coming, and kind of got in a position where I could position myself into a job doing it. And I actually started with baseball analytics because there's a ton of good resources to learn how to, one, code, and two, how to do data science in baseball, just kind of on the side. And I was able to parlay that into an actual career, just building models, like doing a bunch of different types of analysis. So my passion is both football and baseball. I know we're Gridiron AI, but baseball is kind of where a lot of the stuff really started, because the data has always been there. With the NFL, there is a lot of data, but baseball's been at the front end of sports data for a very long time.
So are you a big sports fan? Do you have a favorite team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the Eagles is why I wore the hat, and plus my hair is pretty long. But yeah, I'm a big Philly sports fan. So it's been a fun couple years with Jalen Hurts. The Phillies are hit or miss, year to year. Hopefully they get hot and make another run. But like big Eagles fan.
Yeah, both teams fell just short.
I know.
At least it was exciting.
Well, we missed the perfect storm of if the Sixers got to the finals and lost. It would have been like the first time ever that a city had every major sports team lose in the finals. So I'm pretty sure like the MLS team, the Union, lost in the MLS Cup too, or in the finals. So it would have been like every single sport they kind of get close, but didn't do it. But the Sixers kind of faded out as they always do. But
yeah, that's kind of funny. All right, so. That's pretty cool. So one thing I wanted to know is, I had a chance to look at Gridiron AI. I thought it was really cool. But can you just give us a rundown of what is Gridiron AI in a simple way?
Yeah, so we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to really do two different things. So one is project player stats. And then also, we recently got into game outcomes. So betting models with like who's going to win the spread, who's going to win money line, and then ultimately the game scores. And one of the things that we do is we don't add personal bias to it. So what the model spits out is what you see on the site. There's very few exceptions where we actually like touch anything that come out of kind of the back end and all the different models that we have run on a week to week basis. What this allows you to do really is to get an unbiased opinion on where you think something's going to be. Because when it comes to sports, and one of the reasons why we took this approach is like Zach, one of the co-founders, just randomly posted on LinkedIn, like, I'm just sick of looking at people's opinions on projections. I want to start a company that takes that bias out. And I actually found him I saw the post on LinkedIn randomly. I was like, hey, I'm in. I'm down to do all the data science work. And then, that's kind of how it started. And then another guy named Liam joined in, and then we've kind of just been trying to tackle that problem of trying to remove bias from sports betting and from fantasy football.
Very cool. So that's kind of what inspired you to create this project is you're tired of hearing everybody's opinions. Oh, this team's going to win. I'm betting whatever on this team or whatever. You just kind of wanted an objective, purely statistical, analytic report of the stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the most part. And like, the thing about fantasy football is it's really hard to remove like your personal opinion and feelings about players, really in any type of fantasy sports. That's true. It's like, you draft a guy, he has a bad year. It could just be a bad year, but you're probably never going to draft him again, even though the best outcome for your team might be draft that player again because it's just a one-off year. Because the other thing about football that makes it interesting, and one of the reasons why like we haven't really expanded out into baseball or any of these other sports, is like your samples are very small, which is also some of the challenges. It's like, the NFL season only has, I think, like 272 games, something like that, which is a pretty small sample. Each team only has 17. If you look at baseball, baseball's got about like 4,000 games, more or less. So you do the math, like in baseball, it's kind of more normalized over a full season. In football, it's not like that. It's you're because every game means so much. Your how week to week performance for a player really impacts like your decision making.
Right. That makes sense. So tell us, like, so the average person goes on to Gridiron AI. Is it going to help them with predicting the outcomes of games? Is it going to help them with fantasy players, for their fantasy football draft coming up, or maybe it's happening right now? What is it going to help them do, like the average sports fan?
Yeah, both. And it really just depends on what you're into. If you're into sports betting, yeah, we'll have when the season starts, like the week to week projections, which we also track on NFL Pick Watch. So if you're only into sports betting, which is a lot of people that only care about sports betting, we'll give you our readout on kind of what we think is going to happen in these games. And then if you're like a DFS player or a weekly fantasy player, we'll have the fantasy projections every week as well, where you're able to kind of like after you're done with your draft in the sake of like a weekly league, you can save your team, and we'll try to tell you who on your team you should start on a given week. We don't really have any right now integrations into league, so we can't pull in like, oh, who's on the waiver wire and who should you pick up. That's kind of like in the future where we're trying to take it. But right now is mainly just we'll give you our projections, and you can use them as as you see fit.
Very cool. So tell me, like, I'm a sports fan. I'm a big sports fan. So I follow like all the games, all the sports. Football is my favorite. I like college football. I'm at the University of Tennessee right now as we speak. So go Vols. But anyways, so tell me, like, is this limited to pro football right now, or is it like can you do college sports or something like that, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's like right now we're just the NFL. And I think that there's a point where we get big enough where we can start expanding out into other sports, and logically like college football would be a pretty easy move from week to week. There's more games, there's more players. It's really the same structure of data. There's just a lot of startup costs, in a sense of like it takes a lot of time to get models that one work well, and two, like the infrastructure behind them to make sure that they all work every week and troubleshooting it. So I think that there is like a point where we would expand out to other sports, but right now the main focus is just the NFL, which is also the biggest sport in the United States right now. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at this point.
Yeah, it's a great time because NFL season is here. So what do you see is like what do you see? Like, I look at other sports predictors, right? What is the AI component? Like, how does AI come into play to help you with your projections here? Like, how does some of that back end tech work, I guess?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do is we have a couple different we have a couple different models that ultimately feed our final projections that go on the site. And the way that we try to leverage AI is to build and model probability distributions. So we basically have the AI give us 500 outcomes for a given game for a given player for all of their stats. And then we use that to kind of roll it up into what you see on the site. And we don't do that as much for the betting side, but for the player side, it really gives us the ability to give like a whole distribution of potential outcomes, which allow us to say like, all right, like this player has some upside, they have some downside, and kind of what are those outcomes? Because in the sense of like for most projections that you'll see like on ESPN, CBS, these other sites, like I guess ESPN's gotten into like giving you like a boom bust now, but we've been doing that since we started. They just got into that because there is a range of outcomes in all sports for every player, and just looking at what somebody is going to do in a given game for their average is not like it's not going to be that. It's going to be either more or less. And it's good to see what is the upside and the downside for a given player, and why that's important, especially if you think about it in the sense of like football. If you're, let's say it's a Monday and you need like a Hail Mary, you can go and look at our upside projections and be like, all right, who on my team who has like the highest ceiling, and try and play that person over somebody who may have a lower ceiling but higher floor, because you need the gamble, right?
Right. That makes sense. So how long have you guys been around?
So we started late 2015, like probably midway through the season. It's kind of when like the three original co-founders, like me, this guy named Zach and Liam, kind of all just found the same LinkedIn post by Zach, and we're just like, all right, let's do this. And then we spent basically the whole off season and like the first couple of weeks of the 2016 season getting everything set up. I think we launched actually in like a Google Doc originally. It's like, hey, we don't really have a site yet, but like here's our projections, Reddit, go crazy on them. And it was a good learning experience.
So right now, is it a paid service?
Yeah, so right now we during the season we charge $5 a week, and we only run that through like early December, and we just like give it away, in the preseason and for kind of the postseason, because at that point, like if you're a weekly player and you don't bet, like there's really no value on the site because you're out of the playoffs or whatever. But maybe you want to do some DFS in the playoffs, so we kind of like we shut down the billing during the off season because we only really provide a service during the NFL season, and the meaningful part of the NFL season really ends in December for a lot of people. Now, if we expand out into like DFS more, we may change that or have a subscription it's like just DFS. But for now, we kind of keep it pretty loose on like when we just quote unquote turn off billing for the year, just because we don't want to charge people if they're not getting value from us. Like we're not here to take your money. We're here to help you win, and just billing you when you're not playing isn't a good way to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's not bad at all. $5 a week. I mean, people spend $7 on coffee a day, so that's no big deal. Especially for sports fans, So how many users do you have right now? Do you track that at all, or do you do any data tracking?
Yeah, so we're up to close to like 9,000 total users on the site. That's not the same as our paying. So we actually have two services. We do have like a free service where you can just go make an account and you just get like the top. I think we've been talking about what the final number is, but I think you get the top 10 at each position each week. So you can still get something for free. And then if you want to unlock everything, it's when we have the $5 a month. The other thing you get with the subscription is you get to customize your league settings. So one of the reasons why we project out stats, like not just a final stat, but the counting stats too. And I think every site really does this as well, but it allows you to put in like your custom scoring because some people have crazy scoring rules, and we try to capture that by you create your team, you can go to settings and you can be like, all right, if you get 20 points a touchdown for some reason, like you can go and put all that in, and then it'll recalculate our like distributions to what your settings are in your league.
Right. So like if your algorithms come up with a guy who, let's say, gets a lot of receptions but maybe doesn't get a lot of yards, but they're in a PPR league where you get points per reception, then he might, be higher on the list than he would in some other or standard league or something like that.
Yeah, exactly right. And we have like pre-configured settings. So when you go make an account, we have like PPR, standard, FanDuels, and DraftKings. So like if you just kind of keep it standard, you don't even have to make a custom team. You can just go right to those presets, and then it'll have them recalculated for those for those different scoring settings just by default. Because I would say probably 80% of people probably just do PPR or standard scoring, and then you have the DFS players that either use FanDuels or DraftKings.
How accurate are your algorithms usually? I mean, I know are they a lot different than you see on ESPN or something like that, or how does your data differentiate from what they use, say on like ESPN Fantasy or something like that?
Yeah, so that's when it gets like that's where it's hard to talk to. So like I don't know how any of those sites build their projections or where they get their data from, but we typically we're pretty good. I think that like I don't have it off the top of my head, but we're within like 4 or 5 points for every single player every single week, and it's really just like it's high variance. Like, and that's the challenge. It's like and the data sources that we can track publicly, we post on Twitter every week of like, all right, like here's our average error, and then here's like I think there's like 4 or 5 sites that like actually just put their data out there for people to use, which is great. And we can kind of spot check what we're doing against kind of the easily available data just to make sure we're doing well. Like NFL.com publishes those. We beat them every week. But it varies a lot. Like, if there's a random wide receiver that scores 30 points, like nobody's going to have him at that, like, wide receiver 3. But in general, I've been using it nonstop since we've started it, and I've done pretty well in fantasy. Where you see a lot of variance, I think that like part of part of the value that we also provide is like we're a unique way. Like our projections aren't really in line with everybody else, and the way that we use that is we and Nick from our site, he does a bunch of like podcasts, and he'll usually post a bunch of stuff. What we try and do is see what data is available from like Fantasy Bros and all these other sites, and try to figure out where we are different from them and where we're massively different. Because if you think about it, like the top 5 or 6 players, everybody's going to have them in the top 5 or 6. It's really after you get past that is where you really try to find value. Like a good example is like Justin Jefferson. It's like we don't have him as wide receiver 1, which like everybody's like, why? It's like, look, man, like I don't know. Like I can't really tell you exactly why, but Justin Jefferson had an amazing year last year. He hit 1,800 receiving yards. Like we just don't think our models just don't think he's gonna have that again. And some of that is because like that's not a common occurrence. So if you're expecting him to do that again, yeah, he might do it. And if he does, hey, great on him. Like he's an amazing player, but like the models don't lie. Like we think he's going to come back down to earth. And the other thing about Justin Jefferson last year is he didn't really score a lot of touchdowns. Like most of the point difference between like where we have him now and where he was last year just come from a regression back towards a normal elite wide receiver projection. Because I mean, like we have Devontae Adams and these other guys up there too, and the difference between them is like 3 or 4 points. Like it's not that much, but we just don't have Jefferson I, and people are just asking us why. I'm like, look, man, we just trust the system. Like, I mean, we're not saying don't draft Jefferson, but like, if you're thinking about it, how you translate that to the draft, it's like if you're sitting there and you can get somebody else. Well, I mean, Jefferson's probably a bad example because he's going to go first overall or close to it. But when you get to these guys like later on after the first round, that's really where you can find the values, because you can get these guys later in the draft that we have higher, and we've hit on them we hit on them every year. Like there's always 3 or 4 guys. Like last year we were high on Josh Jacobs. Like he had a really great fantasy year, and nobody else had him as high as we did. And it's just like it's what the model says. Like we just go with it, and if it works, like it's part of the system. It's why we don't overanalyze our projections. We spot check them to make sure that like injuries or things like that don't negatively impact what we're spitting out. Because that is one of the challenges that we have, and we may get to that in a minute. But it is like injuries and things like that are hard for an AI to really grasp or for us to model out. So we have to do some like spot checking just to make sure that nothing gets wacky there. But that's the extent, and it's not even like looking at players. It's like, look, if Alvin Kamara is out all year and we think he's going to play in 16 games, like, or he's suspended for 3 games, we can't really feed that into the algorithm in a way where it learns that effectively, because there's just not a lot of examples of it, right? Like you're not going to have, there's not thousands of players every year that have suspensions that are going to play in less games. So you can't teach it that.
Right. So you'd say that's kind of like one of the limits that you're kind of working on or trying to find ways around, like injuries. Like obviously players go off. That's just fantasy football, or that's just football in general.
Yeah.
A good team that's supposed to win maybe has a couple turnovers and they end up losing the game, and you're like, oh, I mean, stuff happens. That's sports, so you can't control that. But in general, it seems like it does really well. Do you see any other risks or limitations besides like the injuries, or maybe like the wild card players, the receiver that gets 1 reception all year and then he goes for 30 points?
I mean, that's pretty much it. And like those are that's a problem for a different day. Like how can you come up with a model or any type of machine learning algorithm or AI that will be like, and this is really the key to being super profitable at DFS, is finding these guys that like have a higher than normal chance of catching a bomb, like a 60-yard touchdown. Because a lot of these receivers that have like abnormal weeks, they just call it like a 60-yard pass. So how do you actually effectively identify those and project them out? That's a different problem. Like if we got to a point where we had a model that did that well, like that wouldn't be part of like the normal projections. There'd be like another part of the site that would be like boom or bust probabilities, or like not really boom, like upside probabilities, and like why we think that. And they'd be like, hey, these are guys who want to take a risk, and like DFS or something else, like these are the players to take a risk on, because they're either due or the model just thinks that, hey, they may catch a 60-yard pass for a touchdown, which is going to swing you one way or the other in like a lot of different type of competitions.
So you said you're working on that right now. You're working on a way to get those sort of summaries of why they think that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a problem we think we're going to solve, but it is like, I mean, and that's part of like with the rise of like large language models and like newer techniques, like that's where I think some of this stuff is going to go. It's just going to be hard, and a lot of this is like we're not like a research company, like we're not like Google, or we don't have like a massive amount of resources just to throw at a problem and say, look, just figure it out or don't, but it's fine. So a lot of it is just like what we try to do is tinker, like experiment with things when we can, and then wait until we feel good about it to then go and like release it. So like if it, like so the reason why we got into like betting is we just were doing it ourselves, not even trying to put it on the site, just because we had all the data and we're like, hey, we all throw some money, we all sprinkle money on NFL games, like we have the data, we have the time. And then once we were like, hey, this actually works and like these projections are good, we put it into the site because we think that people can get value from that. It'd be the same type thing for this if we got to a point where like we could try to identify, with some level of accuracy like high point share players or boom players, then we would probably keep it ourselves for a while just to make sure that it works, and then we would bring it into the app.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the tech? Like, what kind of algorithms are being used? Where are you pulling the, like, I know we hinted at it earlier, but where are you pulling the data from? Are you pulling it from like the history of their stats? Are you pulling it like how are you pulling those projections? Like, for example, Justin Jefferson, you mentioned him earlier. He had such a great year last year. It seems like if you're pulling just from the stats, he would be the number one guy, right? So why is he not the number one guy? What is it that the algorithm's doing to make it a little different?
Yeah, so a lot of the models, and like we have a bunch of different models that run each week. For like our yearly projections, we try to use multiple years for players that have it, multiple years of their past performance to then try to come up with what their performance is right now, and then we try to layer in information about the teams that they're on. Because I think that is an important aspect that you have to capture is like, what's their O-line going to be like this year? What's their quarterback like going to be this year? Because there is like, at least anecdotally, like if you have a good wide receiver with a really bad quarterback, there is a lower, like they're going to score less points because you can't get the ball to the players. They're not going to score it. They're not going to be able to score. So a lot of the models are using multiple years of data averaged out, like a bunch of different ways to slice and dice it. We have like over like 500 or 600 features that we feed into the model for it to then go and try and come up with what these outcomes are. Now, I can't tell you if it uses all of them, but we try and give it as much information as possible for it to come up with the most accurate projections. And then what you're able to do like week to week, it's a little bit different because there are models that use like sequences. So instead of you having to feed it a bunch of data like last game stats or last year's and the year 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what you can do is just feed it that raw information in a sequence, so it learns like, okay, it knows that this array of data, the last one was 4 games ago, then 3, then 2, then 1, and then we can use that to then help it extract what it thinks it's going to do in the next couple games, and then we can use that to then ultimately come up with the predictions. Yeah, so that's a little bit. I know that was like a lot of detail. I can actually get into like some more on that if you guys want to. I don't know how technical your audience is or what they want to hear, but yeah, it's an interesting problem to solve because there's a million different ways to do it, and usually the answer is do them all and average them together, which is what we try to do as much as we can.
I did have a follow-up. So you mentioned like features. You're giving them features. What do you mean by that? Like, what's an example of a feature?
Features would be the stats. It'd be like their counting stats. It'd be like their rushing yards, receiving yards, air yards, share of air yards. Like basically anything you can think of that is available from like the NFL, like data-wise, we try to use. And then the other thing that we try to do too is you have to, like, for all of this, you have to apply like domain knowledge. So there are really good articles on like Pro Football Focus and like from these fancy experts that do actually have pretty good analysis of like, all right, well, we look for these things and like this seems to lead to good outcomes. We can take that ancillary information, build build those features from that and then use that as another data point with like in our models, which I think is really like not really the secret sauce, but that is in general for machine learning, that is an effective way to increase performance in your models.
Awesome. So are you using I'm Ryan, by the way. I co-founded Fry AI with Hunter. But I won't get into too much details since we're in the middle of the podcast here. But what like are you using an LLM in the background? And forgive me if I ask any questions Hunter already has. Like what LLM are you using to analyze the data? And then like what's if you could go over your tech stack a little bit, we do our audience is anyone from the they just heard about AI yesterday to someone that has a lot of tech background. So we have a lot of different people in our demographic. But if you could just go over those questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we haven't got into using like large language models.
Uh-huh.
We use large language models to start with. It would be to generate like player profiles and summaries from our data, more so like less so for the projections themselves. We played around a little bit with trying to get like summary from game logs out of like large language models, and it's not as accurate as just getting the raw stats from like the NFL, like the NFL Fast R package. Like these pre-built open source tools that people have that already do that are better than like large language models right now for this. I think that you'll see large language models be used a lot more to do like the summaries and like and answer questions about about the data. So instead of you having to go say, hey, who should I pick up? They'll like, and you have to go like, well, you say if you having to figure out who to pick up on your own, you can just ask them like, hey, who's the best player to pick up and have it output it. But I think from like a modeling perspective, we're not there. We're not there in a way that makes it adds any value right now.
Gotcha. So what's the difference between like your site, because you're marketed as AI, and like what is the AI component behind it right now, like compared to the other thousands of sites out there?
That's what I asked too.
Oh, sorry. All right.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. So like, I don't really know how a lot of these other sites come up with their projections, but we use a lot of deep learning models. We use deep learning really to come up with our projections, and then we don't just model stats. We actually model probability distributions. So what we do is we use like TensorFlow probability to come up with, with I think it's like 500 to 1,000 distributions for each player each week, and then we aggregate those up and average them out to come up with what our ultimate projections are. And then what we end up doing is we don't just use one model. So like one of the other things that we do, and I'm not gonna get into a ton of detail because it is a little bit of the secret sauce, but we do model out a bunch of other things that we then feed into the models that you see week to week. And that's really when we started seeing the most performance gains. Wasn't just like taking the data we have and just kind of throwing it into an auto ML package and have it spit out projections. What we end up doing is we have a bunch of different models that run that then ultimately feed that final deep learning algorithm that comes up with what you see on the site, like the projections you see on the site. And we've gotten a lot of lift from that.
So you're kind of like playing possibilities. Like, if I'm understanding this correctly, like we'll keep to our Justin Jefferson example because we've been talking about him. Well, let's say like Justin Jefferson, for example, has some probability of having like 200 yards in a game. Then maybe he has like 80 yards. Maybe he has some probability of having 10 yards. Maybe he has some probability of having zero points. And you run that through like 500 times. Then you take that aggregate and you get a high, you get a low, and then that's what it posts, something from that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, more or less. And like what we haven't done yet, and this is something that we very well could do, is we could eventually get to a point where you can just put in, like, we can give you like those range of outcomes and say like he has a 30% chance of scoring over 50, because out of all the distributions that like that we got from the output, like, if we had 100, like 20 of them he had over 20 yards, which I think goes into like player props and stuff like that. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole because we haven't done that on the site yet, because that data is really not available. But there is a lot of cool stuff you can do with the tools that are available.
It seems like so you have like some things in the oven. It seems like some directions you could take this. Like having like maybe like a chat bot or something like that. So like you could ask it like personalized advice, like should I start Josh Jacobs this week or should I start Nick Chubb or something? I mean, you'd probably start both of them, but let's say you had, um, you know, it would be able to say, well, Josh Jacobs is playing, like give it some sort of like response based on that, or like there seems like there's some different things that you can do. Like you said, player props, like, you know, let's say Justin Jefferson's catch line is like 6.5, like over under. You know, you could do like, well, he's got a 70% chance to go over, something like that. Um, so do you see like these things, like is this a direction you guys want to go, or do you have any other things like you're working on for the future for like the next steps of your development?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, like we're not trying to be everything to everybody. So like there are a lot of really good sites that have really great content. So we're not trying to really do a ton of content. Like I mean, we do have like we do try and do like weekly recaps, and like Nick is really good at just jumping on and like he live streams his draft. Like we're gonna do stuff like that because we enjoy doing it, but we're not trying to be like huge content guys. And I think that like I think that like next up is really just trying to get integrations into different leagues so people can automatically pull in their settings. Like I think very like tactical things. And then like a lot of it really just comes down to like a meta level discussion of like what is fantasy football? Like do you really want some like a large language model to tell you exactly who to play, or do you want to like use the data and make a call yourself? I think that there's really like people that want like both sides of those. But I think that for now, it's really just trying to improve usability on the site because we are still small and relatively new. So like we only make incremental improvements every year, but we're getting to a point where like we can actually start making more changes quicker. At that point, I think like we don't really have a roadmap yet. Like we haven't even got to that. Like once we get into the season, everything stops and we don't really make any changes because you don't like there's too much stuff going on in football. You know, every week there's something new. There's no real downtime. But I think that I don't have a good answer for you outside of like there's endless possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Like you have things you could do, but you're trying to get that foundation solidified and really do that well right now. I think that's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to start because you don't want to run a million miles a minute and then you get back and you're like we're spreading ourselves too thin or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and like and part of the reason why we've I think had the success and like why we've been around and have like we were grinding out like no users for a while. It's just like between all of us that are a part of it, like we all love it and we all give a lot of attention to it, but we just really focus on the things that we all feel is important. And there's really not a lot of pressure. Like we don't have like investors that are pressuring like growth or anything. It's really just like a small group of us that started it that just are kind of like treating this thing as like our baby, and we can move at the speed that we want, which is probably not like what other people would do in our situation, but it's kind of just the reality of like where we're all at in our lives. Like we don't all of us do this as like on nights and weekends, so it's not like we all have full-time paying jobs that require a lot of time and attention as well. And then this is really just like right after that, what do? We dive into kind of where we can try to add the most value to our user base. And a lot of it is like, oh yeah, that's really it. I mean, there's a lot of sites that do a lot of things, and we just can't be that.
That's funny that you say like some people want to use it and some people don't, right? Like some people they don't want to hear the statistics. And I think about like, whenever people have like fantasy football teams and like somebody's girlfriend's in there, or like somebody's wife or like their mom, or like something like that, right? And they're always the ones that like do super well. Or like with March Madness, like they do like no people who don't watch football at all or basketball at all, they do so well, and it's like they just pick it based on the mascot or the color or like whatever. So it's kind of funny how that works, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Is like it is very cool, like to me, like to see all the analytics and stuff like that. But then there's also this component where it's like some people are like, I don't want to do that. I'm better off just winging it, you know. So it is kind of funny that way.
It's an awesome tool also for like, jumping in on your family league. You said it before, like it depends. Some people just want the data and want to make the choices of themselves because they want to have fun with fantasy football. But like our family league, I want to use it to crush my family, like so. But is that sort of like how you got started as well? Like, did you get started in this just because you want to do it for yourself and for your fantasy football league or for betting yourself? And that's sort of how this got created?
Yeah, so like Zach, I think I need to go and like save the LinkedIn post, but I think the whole reason why, like, so it started with like a LinkedIn post from a guy named Zach. I'm pretty sure his LinkedIn post was like, "I want to beat all my friends and family in fantasy football. Who wants to get in on it?" I was like, "I'm in." But yeah, I mean, the betting stuff very much so. Like all the betting stuff we were just doing to try and, because we all, I mean, sports betting is huge, and we all like making pizza bets on games. So that we very much just started doing that ourselves, because who to pick week to week, it's so subjective. Like I don't know, everybody has their own opinion, and my brothers love to give me theirs, and it's usually counter to what the model says. And it's like I don't know, like I know you guys love betting, but I'm going to go with what the model says, because that's not, like, it's not biased. It's like I don't like betting on the Dolphins like plus 20, but like if it says to do it, I'm in.
But your brother's telling you it's a sure win. You got to bet the house on it, so you got to follow him.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So yeah, very much just like we started this just trying to get better rankings than we were getting on ESPN and CBS, which are notoriously bad according to Reddit.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. I get a call from my uncle every week, and he's kind of funny. He's a big sports fan, but he calls me every week. Like ESPN has this guy called the Guru or whatever. It's like a guru is what they call it, and he like they give their projections each week of how well, and they give a little summary of why they think the person's going to do such a thing. And he always calls me every week like, "Oh, the freaking guru again! Like screwed me over," like that. Like they're always terrible. They're always way off. He's like, "How do they still have jobs? Blah blah blah." And so it's just so funny. Like I agree that the algorithms are not that, or the whatever they use is not that good. So I think this really is an area where there could be a lot of improvement and a lot of people could benefit. Like I know, like I play a lot of fantasy football and I read that stuff like a lot. Like I like the analytics, so I think it's really cool. A lot of people do.
Yeah, and like I do love to go on ESPN and all these sites and read their content, because I do like hearing what people say, mainly because like I like to take the people on my team and make sure that these people think that they're good. Like I know I draft my team based on the model, but like you do seek like validation that your choices are the right ones. And also like if we have nothing to do, reading an article about fantasy football is like not the worst thing to spend 10-15 minutes on. That's really the other thing about this too, that is challenging, is like a lot of people use this stuff to validate their choices and like their drafts, and like if you're, and one of the things that we do see is like, hey, I draft, like, you have this guy really low, everybody else has him really high. Why? Because this person has him on their team and they're like upset because they take it very personally that like we're not giving them like an echo chamber that their team is really good, or this player is going to be really good this week. Because when we first started, we posted a lot of our projections on Reddit, and Reddit's brutal. Like those, like in the fantasy football subreddits, people would go in and they would like be real mad at our projections. Like we were personally attacking them. I'm like, guys, like this isn't my opinion. I'm not telling, like, this is just what the model says. Like it's not me, it's the model. Like stop attacking me because you don't agree with what the model says. Like it's not personally attacking your decision to draft this player, start this player this week. It's interesting. Like,
Do you ever get upset when they say the Eagles are going to lose? Does it get your heart a little bit, where you're like,
dude, luckily it didn't have the Eagles losing many games this year. It actually had them winning the Super Bowl too, so I was pretty pumped about that.
"Oh, okay, it has them winning the Super Bowl"?
Well, it had them winning. It had them winning last year when they lost. But yeah, we haven't. I haven't. I don't have. I don't even have. I don't even. We haven't even got to the point where we do like preseason rankings, or preseason like win losses for teams. That's something that's like on my list of stuff to start looking into. I think it's challenging because you don't know. Like, there's so many factors that come into play when you're looking at a whole team performance. Like, if Jalen Hurts goes down, like the Eagle, like whatever you said the Eagles was going to win, you're losing that. Like that's not happening. There's no way they're winning 12 games or 10 games, whatever it is, with a backup quarterback.
It's hard to account for that, right? Because I mean, like, if Jalen Hurts is in, let's say the Eagles are over 10.5 wins. Jalen Hurts is out. It's like, okay, we're going down to like 6.5 wins or something like that.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. I don't want the ire of my home team fans. I want some of the model saying like the Eagles are going to win like 8 games, then post that, and then have like my brother or like my dad call and be like, "Yo, why do they have the Eagles at 8 wins?" Like I don't want to deal with that. Like least not yet.
So I want to ask you, like, apart from your project, this is just a fun question. But what do you think about like the direction of you're in the AI space? So what do you think about the direction of AI more generally? Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that it's going in a direction of just like helping out, like helping tasks get done easier. Yeah, like I'm a bit torn. Like I'm very much like a wait and see kind of guy where like, you know, I'm pretty good about spotting trends and things. I mean, like I got into data at the right time, but like I don't really know where any of this stuff's actually going to go. Cause I mean, I just think on like self-driving cars, like that was hype, like mid 2000s, like 2010, 11. And this still hasn't materialized. Like, I remember just reading articles being like, oh, we're really close to having fully autonomous vehicles. And like, I think the conversation shifted there to just highway only driving because it's more predictable. So like I think like generally like the AI space is complicated. Like the future is really hard to fully understand. Like I say that like I think it'll be good tools to help people in their jobs and like their passion projects because like I use ChatGPT a lot at work to help with like coding and like and it does make a huge difference. Like when you want to experiment with something new, anytime you're reducing like the barrier of learning or the barrier of getting started, you're going to see a lot of benefits. So I think that like AI is going to help reduce the barriers to a lot of things, and that's going to do a lot of good for a lot of people. Because like you know, it's hard to get started. It's really hard for people, at least for me personally, to get started on something new because I know the startup cost of having to like, especially when it comes to like coding or like new models. It's like getting there, like it takes a lot of like trial and error to get something started. But when you have like AI, if you have like Chat GPT or these other like Bard where they can get you started and help you work through errors while learning, I think that it makes everything like way more approachable. Like I have examples in my job right now where like things that I thought were gonna take me like 3 months to 4 months to do myself, I got done in like 3 weeks because I was able to use like Chat GPT to like because I knew there were gonna be things I was gonna run into, but instead of having to like search through Stack Overflow or Google or just like go back to like all the books I have on my desk, I can just go ask like Chat GPT or to help me with very tactical things, and it makes you iterate a lot quicker. So I would say that like that's if I think of like at least in the short term, I think that like anybody who's using this to create like enablers for people to do things, I think that's where it's going to go. Because it's just tough. I mean, like chatbots are great. Like I don't know, it's a lot of hype. There's a lot of hype around like general intelligence, and maybe it's real. Like I'm not. I wouldn't call me like a visionary, but yeah, it's it's a crazy time to be alive. I will say that. It's a great time to be alive. To be honest with you, it's you know if you told me you know when we started Gridiron, or if you told me like 10 years ago that you know there would be tools like ChatGPT, Bard, or whatever GitHub's like coding is, where you could like take something like coding, which is like you have a super high barrier to entry and reduce that and help people be more effective, I would have called you crazy.
It's crazy. Like I do front end development work, and like the first time I saw ChatGPT or any of these LLMs doing coding, it was like mind blowing. You know, like that word's overused so much, but it really was because you put in so much time to think about a simple every keystroke you put in to code something, and it just spits out everything you need. I mean, it's crazy. I think it's one day it's going to just why do you even need someone to code a website? Maybe to do fine tuned details for things, but to do a general website or general stuff, it can do it a lot of that stuff now. It's insane. You know, if you want to just pump out describe a website you want to create, you know, I think ChatGPT can pretty much do it for you. Very basic one right now, but that's going to change quickly. So it's nuts.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, people have to just learn how to use it and embrace it, which I think like that's also part of it too. Is like you know the adoption for guys like you and I, Ryan, is pretty high. Like I'm all about just like taking what's new and start using it and getting my hands dirty. But there are people that are just like they're going to be slower, and like businesses are also going to be slower. Like I think the horizon for a lot of this stuff to be widely adopted, based on like my experience, is going to be slower than most, just because like not everybody moves at like the speed of light. Like one of the advantages and why I like Gridiron is like there's only five of us right now. So like we have to make a decision or do something. We can just do it. Like there's nothing complex about it.
There's no like corporate structure you need to go through, and ask for pull requests and all this stuff.
Right. Yeah, ask for pull requests to get business buy-in, like find the value, not be distracted by a million other things that people think are a priority that may or may not actually be a priority, like or they may actually drive value. I think that, they're it's a lot easier to adopt things when you're in a smaller group. So I think that like freelancers and stuff like that, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to make money by using these tools and going on like Upwork or Fiverr, these other sites, and just selling services that are more or less just helping, just putting stuff into Chat GPT and putting out and getting those outcomes into things you can sell.
Yeah, I saw someone was doing like they said they made like $1 million on Upwork or Fiverr just by doing basic work, like because nobody else wants to do it, but they just do it in mass, so it's nuts. Um, but yes, what one thing I wanted to ask you, hopefully Hunter didn't ask you this yet, but for your like for sports betting in particular, I know you guys offer a bunch of different things. Do you have a win rate, or like what is that win rate? I thought someone advertised on your site before what that was, but if there is one, how much data did you get to get there? Like how much time did it take for you to get that number?
Yeah, so like I don't have it off the top of my head. So like you can go on so we do put all of our picks in NFL Pick Watch. So we were like our accuracy, I think for like spread is around 52 to 53%, which is pretty good. And then money line we're in like the mid 60s, and it varies from year to year because of small samples. But I think we've been doing it. We started during the COVID football season. Like we started actually like publishing them in NFL Pick Watch during COVID. So like that was what, 2020, 21, 22. So this is the fourth year that we've done it on the site. So we have a pretty good track record. And you can go on NFL Pick Watch and like we have a link to it on our site, like, and you can see like our trends, like they have pretty good data too of like what teams do you do the best with, what teams do you do the worst with. I will say that one thing that the sports betting stuff has taught me is the way Vegas sets their lines is very good. Like when you're building models, every model that we build when it's trying to predict who's going to win against the spread, it's very hard to get much lift above like 53-54% accuracy just because the lines are so well optimized. It's honestly crazy.
And you said you were at 52 for the spread.
It varies week to week, and that's the thing about, and that's the challenge when it comes to spread betting is we have weeks where it's like 16%. We get like 2 games right, and then we have other weeks we get 14 right. So it's really hard. I mean, like when I use our projections to bet the spread, I take that and I inject like my personal opinion on it because one, like I'm not a serious person when it comes to sports betting. Like I'm betting like $5. So I'm betting the spread, I'm betting like $5.
Yeah, you're not betting 50 grand at a time or something.
Yeah, it'd be a little bit different. We have had a lot of success on money line because you don't have as much. It's harder. The money line's harder to make money on because you're basically, you could be betting 10, you could be betting 100 to win 60. So you have to get that right more times than not. But we have had a lot of success with some betting strategies using the money line because it is so accurate. And this year we actually have a lot more data than we had last year, and we've been adding in like a lot more advanced, like a lot more calculated inputs that I think, and I should knock on wood, that like I think should add lift because they're like things that make sense. It's like pressure rate on the quarterback, like first and second down efficiency. Like those are things that we didn't have access to in the past that we do now. Like, yeah, they're calculated fields, but like they actually do matter. Like how well you do on like the passing downs does actually, like it is a good indicator of like how good your team is if you look at it over the course of a whole game.
Gotcha. So like the Vegas is, I mean, it's scary how good they are at predicting, making the spread. It's insane, and I'm sure they're going to start using AI themselves as well, so they'll even get better. But it sounds like it's going to be like a race, right? Like you guys are. I mean, Vegas is probably doing their thing in the background. Nobody knows how they're doing the spreads, but if they're implementing AI and you guys are doing it as well, it's almost going to be like a battle between you guys and Vegas to see who's going to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, maybe like the thing about spread is like Vegas actually doesn't care what the final number is. They just want the even money on both sides, so they make it in the middle. So like so the reason why these lines are so optimized is like let's say that you know let's say the Eagles against what's a bad team. I'm going to offend somebody by saying this. Let's say the Commanders because they're in my division.
I'm a Browns fan, so they're usually the bad team, but
I like the Browns though. The Browns are like I love the Browns. So let's say that it's Eagles at Commanders, and let's say that somehow their line's not optimized. Or like let's say that we think it's a high probability, and everybody's hammering the Eagles like -2, which would be a great line against the Browns, like at home, like -2. Like that's crazy. Like the second Vegas sees too much money on the Eagles, they'll kick that line up because they want people to start betting the Browns. So like that line could move from 2 to 6 in 1 week if everybody's hammering the Eagles because they need money on the other side.
are you saying it's more like Vegas isn't really doing that much? It's more what the people are predicting the games.
Yeah, yeah. People are driving the lines more so than sites like ours. Like we can still like there is potentially a way for us to find an edge of like lines that aren't correctly optimized, and by doing that, we would have to come up with our own line and be like and basically try and predict what the final line would be for a game compared to the opening line and be like, all right, we think the line's going to move here, so this is good value to buy right now. But Vegas is actually going to always be ahead of the curve because their systems are already designed to make sure that they don't get killed on one bet. And there's enough people, and like you can move lines. Like there are like let's say that we had 1 million people. That'd be great. Let's say 1 million people use our site, and we said bet the Eagles, and they all bet the Eagles. That we could move Vegas's line. The thing about sports betting is I think it's getting to a point in the U.S. where it's big enough where like there's enough normal people that aren't like there's a bunch of people like my brothers or like all my friends that just like they enjoy just betting a couple bucks or $20 on a game, and they're going to go to their podcast and they're just going to go and like sprinkle some money here or there that it'll outweigh anything that like sites like ours that may have an edge would do to remove that edge. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
It's almost like if you sample more people than Vegas does, you could get more accurate odds if that's possible. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, like yeah. If you could like, I think that like going back to like where like some of this AI tech could go, like if there was a way for you to like actually aggregate like sentiment about teams and like betting, like where the money's flowing, I think that you could probably come up with a way to say, look, we think all the money's flowing here, so you should either get it on the other side now or you like wait. So I think that there is some stuff there, but you need to sample a huge amount of people and see where their money is going. And there may be like services where like because I know that ESPN on like all their betting shows will like talk about like where the money is because like Caesars will say that like there's 80% of the money is on the Eagles. Like we don't have access to that data. That'd be nice to know. But there are like Vegas has it, and like people do have access to that information. That's just not available to us.
One thing we interviewed this one site. They're called Chirper.ai. It's a social media site where they don't allow humans, so you can create bots on there. And these bots, you can describe anything you want about them. Be like, you could say, create a bot that loves fantasy football and all he does is bet on sports all day. And this bot will just all day post on this social media site about who he's going to bet on, who he likes, and all. I mean, it's pretty incredible. But one of their use cases is, and I thought it might fit with you guys, is you could create millions of bots and you do market research, right? So you could ask the bots who they're going to bet on, and these bots pull data from the outside world. So instead of like doing a market research group to call people on the phone or however Vegas does it, well, Vegas does it because they get the betting in. But if you want to sample 1 million people on who they're going to bet, you could do it via their site. I don't think they're that big yet, but they're pretty close to being able to do something like that.
That sounds really interesting. Yeah, maybe I'll try and connect with them because like the other use case for that too is like for daily if you guys play DFS, even if you don't, like a lot of the way you find an edge there is to start players that other people aren't. So if you can get like from Twitter or whatever, like kind of sentiment on like who people are like really high on, you want to fade some of those guys because you need a unique lineup. Like when you think about like the million maker like the people who make millions of dollars in these tournaments, it's because they have like the amount of players that they have like a couple guys that everybody has, but they have 4 or 5 that have like a 2% ownership rate. So you can only really get that by like trying to project out ownership, which is really hard right now. But if you had a way to actually pull in, like, if you know all the sites are kind of hyping up like these groups of people, and you see people saying, "Hey, this is what my lineup looks like," if you can get away from them and fade those guys, it actually gives you an advantage in these competitions to make sure you're trying to get low owned players.
Yeah, it's almost like it's better. It's better just to take that risk because everybody's betting on the same people. So
It is like if you're trying to win, like a tournament, like not just a head to head game, like you absolutely have to take risks, and like that's why we haven't really solved DFS yet. It's very hard, like to find an optimal lineup that wins consistently, especially in tournaments, because you have to have enough variation, and we haven't got to a point where like we do a great job at that. Just because it's a different it's a it's a uniquely different challenge for something that's so similar to fantasy football.
gotcha. But you'll get there one day.
Yeah, hopefully.
If you want to promote anything, now's the time to do it. Like your site or anything else, Twitter handles, whatever you want.
You can just find us at gridironai.com. Hunter already talked kind of about like kind of the services that we offer. We're also in Discord. It's Gridiron AI, one word. It's open. We have a lot of channels. We actually just moved from Slack to Discord. Like we're done being boomers in Slack. We're in the Discord chain. Like, we just, yeah. So we're in there. So we have a lot of good people in there that if you have questions, or you just want to come say hi or yell at me because you don't like what the model says that somebody you drafted, how they're going to perform. Like I'm here for you guys. Yeah. So that's, thanks for the time, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, I could talk to you for another hour. So
yeah, easy.
But good luck, and everybody check out their site. Put some money down maybe, and who knows, you'll maybe be a big winner and you'll be a millionaire. Don't take it out on Andy if you're not. I mean, if you're living homeless by the side of the road, it's not Andy's fault. But yeah, if you want to check out our newsletter, it's fry-ai.com/subscribe. You can check us out on Twitter as well. It's the Fry AI, at the Fry AI. That's it. Thanks so much, Andy. We'll be publishing this soon, and can't wait to talk to you again sometime.
Good. Thanks, Ryan. See you.